This video is brought to you with support from my patrons on Patreon.
Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and it's time to update you on the progress of my layout, because you can see there's some scenery going in. Welcome back. As I said, it's a layout update today, and it's a pretty cool one because I have started scenery work. I really enjoy sharing this journey with you guys and showing you guys my layout. But as much fun as it is to see the scenery come alive on this, I'm starting with the most unfun part of scenery, which in my opinion is ballasting.
Now, I already had the rocks in place from a previous video, and I'll go ahead and link that right up here as well as at the end of the video. But one thing that's important when you're starting out your scenery is you want to make sure that your area is clean of any debris, so you're going to want to go ahead and brush everything off. And the first thing I always start with when I'm doing scenery like this, especially on the track, is I always want to start with the roadbed, because what I want to do is basically build the roadbed first, and then any scenery that I build after it will kind of blend into it. It looks a little weird if you do the scenery and then the roadbed, so you always want to do the roadbed first. And what I do is I just do a little bead of glue, and then I spread the glue out using a little brush. And I am using Kato Unitrack, but if you're doing any sort of roadbed work with your track, you can use this exact same method. The only thing that's going to be different is if you're putting your track directly on the surface that your layout's built on. Next, it's time to begin applying some of the ballast. I'm using Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast in their gray color, and this is one of the ways I do it. I either use a spoon, or in this case, I'm actually using the cap from the shaker container that it came in, and I use this and I just gently tap and spread it out. Now notice that it is going everywhere, but we're gonna fix that. So basically we just want to get it down and make sure that it's covering that glue area, and then we're going to just sweep everything back up into the road bedded area. Now, once I have neatened up everything, I go ahead and put some of the roadbed in between the ties. Now, this is a little bit more difficult with Kato Unitrack. This is one of the drawbacks of using Kato Unitrack, is that it is more difficult to ballast in between the ties because it doesn't have that little gap that you would have when it is just tracks sitting on some cork roadbed. So you still have to be a little bit more careful with this, but at the same time, all you have to do is just spread out a little bit, and then you're just going to want to even it out. You're probably going to have very little actual ballast on in between the rails and in between the ties, but you just want to make sure that you spread it out nice and evenly and get it all even as well. The next thing I need to do is soak all of this in some isopropyl alcohol, and I'm going to be doing this with some 70% IPA. Couldn't find any 90% IPA right now, a little bit difficult to find, but 70% will work just fine. This is to release the surface tension on all of the ballast. Now, if you were just to put glue straight on this, you would have the issue of it beading and bubbling and just rolling off. If you use the IPA, you can also use something called wet water, which is essentially water with a few drops of dish soap. You get where it releases the surface tension so the glue can soak in when you apply it. Now, before you glue, you want to make sure that everything is all neatened up. So go ahead and take a brush and sweep everything up, get everything looking as nice as possible, because once it's glued down, it's not coming up easy and it's not coming up pretty. So make sure that you have the roadbed looking as close to what you want it to look like as you can get it. And now it's time to apply our homemade Scenic cement, which is just a 50-50 white glue water mixture. Now you're actually going to see me use a couple different versions of this as well as the IPA. In this video, this particular version is 50-50, and I'm applying it with a little condiment bottle. You're also going to see me use it in a sprayer, and that is actually going to be about a 30% glue, 70% water mixture so that it goes through the sprayer better. But you're just going to see me continuing on with a lot of ballast work here. This is just the same process over and over again. And you just take this, you do your ballasting, you do your gluing, you do your IPA soaking, and you just keep going and going and going. Ballasting is one of those things that you have to get right for your model railroad to look good. So you want to take your time, but that also means that this is one of the more tedious scenery tasks of model railroading.
Okay, that's enough ballasting for now. I'll do a little bit later, but let's get on to some of the fun stuff, the scenic stuff.
Now I let all of that dry and it looks pretty good, so I'm gonna go ahead and start putting my scenic base all around. And I'm just using, as it literally says on the bottle right there, I'm just using some school white glue for that to hold down the initial base. And I just squirt it out. Now those little bottles, I love using them and I don't go and buy them out. I usually just reload them with a big container of glue. But I'm gonna take a foam brush and spread out all of the glue evenly so that when I apply my base, it is going to be nice and even for it to stick to, so that we get a nice even coat. Now, for the actual base coat itself of scenic material, I'm using Woodland Scenics Blended Turf Earth Blend. Now, this is actually a foam product versus some of the stuff I've used in the past. I've used Scenic Express dirt. I've actually made my own dirt. I'll link those up here as well as at the end of the video. But this is also a great way to get that scenic. It's got that brownish color so that it kind of looks like underbrush dirt colory looking type deal, but it's very easy to spread. Sometimes the dirt gets a little crazy, and if you get in the wrong spot, it can actually make spots look dirty and dirty where you don't want it. So I'm using this Woodland Scenics Turf right here. It's also a lot easier to get a hold of right now. I actually did want to use Scenic Express dirt for this particular project as my base layer, but I had trouble finding it. So the Woodland Scenics Blended Turf Earth Blend works fantastic. After that, before doing anything to secure it down, I come back with some Woodland Scenics Fine Turf Green Grass and just go around giving this some intermittent spots of green just to give this sort of a greenish tint before I go and do any heavy scenery with it. But this will give me a good base to put anything down on. Now it's also at this point where I need to start blending the rocks into the scenery. So I'm going to use the same technique, and I'm going to use that same earth blend to go ahead and put around the edge of the rock. But the first thing I need to do is I need to get some glue around these rocks. So I'm going to go ahead and use my foam brush and get some glue all nice in there so that we can put some of that earth blended turf on there and blend these rocks in. Now, one thing you will notice is that I'm not going all the way to the top with my Woodland Scenics Earth Blend in the base coat as well as the green grass blend. And that is because the top of this is going to be covered in trees and a canopy. And the way that I'm doing that is simple puffball trees. I know that there's a lot of different opinions on puffball trees, but if you are modeling deciduous forests, mountains like Eastern North America, Appalachia, things like that, puffball trees are the easiest way to get a good looking canopy. Now I'm not going to be doing solely puffball trees, but the base of this is going to be puffball trees. So I'm basically doing I got my Scenic cement, which is actually that 30-70 blend, 30% glue, 70% water I need to be able to soak through. And then I've got some black polyfill from Micromark. I'll link all of this in the description below. And then I have just a simple cheap baking sheet, a throwaway baking sheet with some of the Scenic material. I have some of the Woodland Scenics Dark Green and the Woodland Scenics Blended Turf Green, and this is what I'm going to use to make my puffballs. Now, some people make puffballs in batches. I like to make them as I go. This means that I'm not wasting any material, or I can shape them exactly the way that I want. But you can see that I put the glue down, and what I basically do is I just roll them around in the different colors. Now, I will mix and match colors and blend different colors with this. That's why I always like having two different colors. This gives a little bit of variety to the canopy itself, because not all trees are going to look exactly the same. You see me rolling it back and forth, and eventually all the scenic material will get blended together. But I did a lot of puffball trees here. I didn't do the entire thing because puffball trees are a lot of work. They're like They're easy to make, but when you're doing them, you're generally doing a lot of them. And this isn't the only spot that I did them. I also went ahead and began covering the far back mountain on my layout. And this is where I'm working my scenery back to front because this is going to be the hardest scenery to reach. So I want to go ahead and get it done before I start working on any of the foreground scenery. But I need to get this thing covered in a canopy, and the easiest way to do that was puffball trees. Now, one thing I really like about making puffball trees as I go rather than making a batch and installing them is I can really make them into that shape, and this really came in handy with this particular one because I did have some issues, especially on the really steep parts where the trees wouldn't stick, and I had to continuously reshape them to where they would stick properly. And if I was doing that in batches, that would have been a bit more difficult. So being able to reshape and pull and do the trees right as I'm making them made this a lot easier to do. Now I'm going to be doing several different things to blend this into the scenery. I don't just want to have puffball and then ground because that's not what it looks like. But to begin with, I'm going to be taking some of the Woodland Scenics bushes, some of their clump foliage, and I'm going to be putting it right here along the edges just to get a little bit of the gaps, and plus it looks like some undergrowth has spilled out onto the rocks. So this is what I'm going to be doing to start blending in the puffball trees and the rest of the scenery. I also take some glue and glue some of the little bushes and that clump foliage along the edge of the rocks. I don't want it to be suddenly rocks and then ground, even though some places that does look good. I do like the way it looks along the ground. But I just wanted to blend that in a little bit, make it look like it's somewhat overgrown, like these rocks have been out for a while, which is a lot of what you see in the eastern mountains of North America. You see these rock outcroppings, but there's a ton of vegetation around them. Now for one of my favorite little tricks that gets the ground looking very rough and uneven and more natural for that matter. And that is to use some coarse turf, whether it's Woodland Scenics. There's several companies that make stuff like this. And basically I just kind of run it and rub it over all of the ground that I've already placed on there. And what this does is it basically gives kind of an overgrown, uneven look to the ground, and it just makes it look like there's vegetation all over the place. And you can do this with a couple different things. Blending multiple lengths of static grass is another way to do this as well. But this is a very quick and easy way to get that uneven natural vegetation look along the ground. And next up, I go ahead and spray some IPA on this and let it soak in just a little bit so that I can, when I spray my scenic glue right here, it is able to soak in. Now, I do have this on the highest misting setting, but this scenic cement is just having trouble doing some misting. So I make sure to hold the bottle a little bit further away and more of a dribble onto the scenic material. It will soak in, but you don't want to hit it directly with streams because that's going to mess up your scenery. And one last thing you want to make sure whenever you do this kind of thing is you want to just take a cloth. I like to ball them up really tight, and then I just rub them across the track, and that will just kind of sort of keep the track clean as you continuously use different scenic glues and materials.
Okay, I gotta hop back into doing some more ballasting, but it's also part of not only the first industry that I'm really starting to work on my layout, it's also the beginning of roads.
I then just continually work on different areas. This is going to end up being a little concrete facility, and I wanted to go ahead and get it going as well. And I've got some other stuff I'm going to do with this, but it's basically the same process. It's a lot of rinse and repeat when you're talking about the base for your scenery, and it's just a lot of repetitive action. So I just go ahead and do my ballasting. I spread out my glue and do the exact same process over and over again. And once that's done, I go ahead and spread out some more glue so that I can put some more of that earth blend on there because I'm going to be doing a slightly more detailed transition out of a tree canopy right here on this fade out of the hill, and I'm going to eventually be using some Scenic Express super trees for that. So I want to go ahead and get the base underneath. When you're using super trees, you want to make sure that you get a good looking base underneath because you are going to be able to see all the way to the ground. Now this is a little bit of a look into an upcoming video where I'm doing roads with styrene. Now the reason that you actually see all of that white spackle looking material is because I actually was going to originally try to do the roads with spackle, and I have done this before except with joint compound on MRR1 and it worked out great, but this time it didn't turn out that well, and I wanted to take this as an opportunity to do styrene roads because styrene roads are a great way to make roads. They look great, and if you can weather them and they look great, but I wanted to show you guys this is something that is coming up in a future video. Now for this area over here where I'm going to put that concrete plant that I said, I am going to be needing a gravel area. So I'm using one of Woodland Scenics gravel kits right here. I say a kit, it's really just two things. It's a gravel and accent dirt. But what I'm gonna do here is basically I'm following the instructions on the kit, and I need to first put down some glue for the gravel base to sit on, and then I go ahead and spread out the gravel. Now I'm doing this by hand because I want this to be as even as possible, and the way that I'm doing that is I'm doing little pinches at a time and spreading around evenly, kind of like I'm cooking, and then I'm going to go ahead and let it dry, and I go ahead and soak it with some IPA and put some Scenics on it, and then I need to let it dry. Now one thing that I wanted to make sure is the transition points with these styrene roads are very important. So what I did was basically I kind of like over poured the gravel right here on the edge, but I poured it on the styrene side so I could sweep it out and pat it out evenly so it just looked like the end and the gravel kind of meshed. And then once all this was done, I go ahead and take a little bit of a brush and I dab in some of the accent colors, the little pigments I guess is what they are, and then I went ahead and sprayed that down again, and it was good to go.
Now, what kind of host would I be showing you guys my progress on my model railroad if I didn't show you some trains running? I'm really starting to get into the nitty-gritty of the fun part of model railroading, in my opinion, which is doing the scenery. This is where the magic happens. This is where it comes alive and it starts to look like what you pictured in your head. So this is the really cool part, in my opinion. You're gonna see more of that as I continue with more layout updates, which I'm obviously gonna do. I do wanna say a big thank you to all of my patrons. They're listed right here. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below to that page. If you wanna check out some of those videos that I mentioned, they're going to be right here at the end of this video. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading. Tilt that up. That was not a good. That looks better. Yeah. Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and I want to share with you really starts to come alive and look like what you did in your brain. Not did in your brain.